sometimes they come for families. Indigenous author shares more info about the star people. This is by Steve McConnelly, Collective Spark. Despite the fact that this topic has been considered conspiracy theory for many years, any intelligent person who actually decides to take a gander at the evidence cannot really deny the existence of unidentified flying objects, as well as the idea that some of them may actually be piloted by extraterrestrial beings from somewhere else in the universe or the multiverse. Now, as far as UFOs go, there is physical evidence in the form of materials from downed crafts, radar tracking, pictures, and videos. We have recently the issue concerning the USS Nimitz UFO encounters, but we also have the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean telling us of all this. They were even having the ability to have space travel. And he claims he buried his spaceship underneath the Sphinx in a plateau of pyramids in Egypt. We know that Egypt in Greek means Iptameno, means flying. And from Aeo, Aegean. They were flying all over the Aegean. That's a compound word, Aegyptos, meaning Egypt, meaning flying over the Aegean. Anyway, they did have advanced technology, the ancients, and from what Plato told us, the demise of Atlantis was because of their misuse of advanced technology, of their haughtiness, of their selfishness, of the way they were treating other people in the world. But some of them did escape the destruction and went to other areas of the world and set up their cities with pyramids and their technology. And some of these Atlanteans also became known as the deities of the ancient worlds. Thoth became one of the first deities of ancient Egypt. Now, so we have all this in our past history. Was it mythology? Was it legends? Was it true? Now, as far as UFOs go, there's physical evidence from what we said, down crafts, radar, pictures, videos. And when it comes to extraterrestrial hypothesis, there are witness testimonies from generals. We even have the former Defense Minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer, going around decades now, stating that there are off-world beings that are here, and also advising and consulting world leaders. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because they could be controlling our world that way. Do we want that? I have no idea. Now, when it comes to extraterrestrial hypothesis, there are witness testimonies, generals, we said, other high-ranking government officials, whistleblowers, even astronauts from all over the world. The fact that these crafts perform maneuvers, no known man-made craft can contribute to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Another factor to consider is the vast amount of stories that date back thousands of years, as we said, the Emerald Tablets, and even the stories told by the ancient Egyptian high priest to Solon, who told them to Plato, and Plato wrote them down concerning Atlantis. So they dating back thousands of years concerning several cultures all over the world, from ancient legends and lore all the way to modern day lore. Indigenous cultures from North America are a great example. Quote, "My people tell of star people who came to us many generations ago. The star people brought spiritual teachings and stories and maps of the cosmos, and they offered these freely. They were kind, loving, and set a great example. When they left us, my people say there was a loneliness like no other." End quote. For the past few months, I've been sharing the work of Dr. R.D. Six-Killer-Clark, a professor emeritus at Montana State University, who is Cherokee Choctaw and has been researching the star people and collecting encounters between them and Native Americans for many years. She first learned about the star people, quote-unquote, when her grandmother told her the ancient legends of her people. I've written about a story she shared regarding an elder who told a story about a ship that crashed on his reservation. and you can read it here. And the link, I wrote about another elder who shared a story of a petrified alien heart, which he claimed belonged to the star people, and you can read the story here on that link. And my last one was about the stories told by Indigenous elders about star people who are currently, and have been for a long time, living inside of the earth, and you can read that here on the other link. This will be my fourth article sharing the stories Dr. Clark compiled in her book, Encounters with Star People, Untold Stories of American Indians. How fascinating this is. Chapter 3 is titled, Sometimes They Come for Families. Right off the bat, I find this interesting because having been a researcher into the phenomenon myself for a very long time, I know that the idea that some of these beings are taking people, families, and in some cases large communities, is not uncommon. It might sound scary, but the truth is that within the lore, many of these beings don't have much interest in hurting or harming us. That being said, there are stories of both malevolent and benevolent types of beings, but for the most part, it does not seem that the various groups visiting us mean us any harm. There are things happening that we don't understand, or perhaps we're not capable of understanding, yet some of these events we might perceive in a fearful, harmful way. When it comes to supposed abduction stories and the claims made by tens of thousands of people, there are many consistencies in their stories. It's truly a very interesting issue to look into, but that's a different story. One example Dr. Clark shares in her book is as follows, quote, in the 1930s, a fur trapper named Arnaud Laurent and his son saw a strange light and an unusual aircraft crossing the northern sky towards Lake Anjikuni in northern Canada. The trappers described the object as cylindrical or bullet-shaped. Shortly thereafter, Joe Labelle, another trapper, snowshoed to the Eskimo fishing village of Anjikuni. The village, home to 2,000 Eskimos, appeared unnaturally silent when he arrived. He visited every hut and storehouse and found blackened stew pots, but no people. Inexplicably, he did not find a single human track in the settlement. Labelle, concerned about the missing people, went directly to a telegraph office and reported the mystery to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Several hours later, the Mounties arrived and were baffled by the mass disappearance of the villagers. A search party looked for the missing villagers, but they were never found. The sled dogs belonging to the Eskimos were found buried under a 12-foot snowdrift at the perimeter of the camp. All of them have starved to death. The search party also discovered untouched provisions and food in the huts. Later that night, the Mounties stared in wonder at a strange blue glow, lit a steady, pulsating light, unlike the northern lights that frequented that part of Canada. Newspapers throughout the world reported the baffling disappearance of the 2,000 Eskimos. Many people believed there would be a rational explanation for the disappearance, but the Anjikuni group disappearance remains unsolved. Today, stories are still told in the Eskimo communities about the UFO that abducted an entire village. While this event in Canada is rare and unusual, there are encounters spoken about on reservations where entire families have disappeared without a trace. Just as in the case of the Canadian disappearance, these events occurred simultaneously with the emergence of a mysterious craft. During the course of my research, I was told about two such events. On one occasion, the family of 14 disappeared, leaving behind plates that had been filled on the dinner table, a television blaring in the bedroom, and an oven that had not been turned off. Despite years of searching, no family member was ever located, but their relatives can show you a burnt-out circle on the ground where they believed a spacecraft landed and spirited them away." End quote. Interesting, isn't it? There are even entire civilizations that have vanished without a trace, like the Mayans, for example. What happened to them still remains a mystery, and some believe they were also taken. Writing this line in this moment reminded me of Apollo 12 astronaut Al Worden, who shared his belief about the subject a few years ago. Forum Wutsi, quote, "We are aliens, but we just think there's somebody else, but we're the ones who came from somewhere else, because somebody else had to survive, and they got in a little spacecraft, and they came here, and they landed, and they started civilization here. That's what I believe. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they had to say about it. They'll tell you right up front," end quote. And you could read that, watch him state this comment video, link here in this article. It's also interesting to note the fact that multiple astronauts have said, without a doubt, that we have been visited and are still being visited, and that they've been privileged enough to be in on that type of information. One great example would be Dr. Edgar Mitchell, was quite outspoken on the subject throughout his lifetime. Dr. Clark then goes on to describe an encounter she had with someone who would eventually become her friend, an elder who lived on a reservation in North Dakota, who had an alleged encounter with the Star People. He explained how Star People visited the reservation was not uncommon when he was a child, but when the government came in and changed the land, the Star People stopped visiting. This man's name was Luther. According to him, quote, "Sometimes when people disappeared on the reservation, it was said that the Star People had taken them away to live in the stars. Once a whole family disappeared. I was a young man when the family disappeared. The disappearance happened right after I got home from the war, probably around 1946 or 47 maybe. They were never found. When their relatives went to visit, they found everything just like they got up in the middle of dinner and walked away. Food on the table, and everything seemed to be in order except the family. There were 7 of them in all. They were gone. No one on the reservation ever saw them again. They held a ceremony, and the holy man said that they were taken to live among the Star People," unquote. He went on to describe his experience, quote, "It was shortly after the dam was built, maybe 5 or 6 years or so after the family disappeared. I was down by the lake one evening. The horses went there to drink in the evening, and I wanted to harness Peanuts, put him in the barn, but it was just about dusk. Suddenly, the hair on my body stood up like an electric shock. I looked around, and that's when I saw it. A huge object came in over the butte to the north of the property. It came slowly, and it was the size of a battleship. I sat down on the edge of the lake and watched. The horses ran away. I was alone. The craft moved to the center of the lake and just stayed there without moving. It was suspended in midair. At some point, I started back towards the cabin. That's when they saw me, I guess. Suddenly, a light came out like a searchlight and fell directly on me. I kept walking. I didn't know what else to do. When I got back to the house, I went inside. I went into the bedroom to look out the window, and that's when I saw them, 2 of them. They were in my bedroom. I stopped, frozen in my tracks when I saw them. They looked at me and seemed just as surprised as me. They were about 5'7" or 8. They were dressed in light-colored uniforms that glistened when the light from the craft hit them. I started backing towards the door, and they told me they would not hurt me. They were searching for something. I understood it to be something they had left behind or left here, but they could not find it. When I asked them what they were looking for, they replied, but I did not understand what they said. He went on to describe when they went back into their craft and left, the craft stopped and hovered over the spot where the missing family once lived. Quote, "Their cabin was submerged in water after the lake was built by the government. I watched for maybe 30 to 40 minutes. The spaceship just hung there, no movement, no sound, and then suddenly it moved upward and was gone. I have not seen it since," end quote. One thing Luther vividly remembers is the fact that they had this stick-like thing. He said it had some kind of motor, I think, because I remember lights blinking on it. Strangest machine I ever saw. I had never seen anything like it, and I saw a lot in the air in the war. They held it and pointed it around the room. The stick must have talked to them or something, because once they pointed it in every direction, they seemed satisfied that I did not have what they were looking for. They put it in a holster. They told me not to be afraid, and I wasn't. They actually acted like I was not even in the room, just ignoring me, so to speak. They were all business. They were shaped like humans. I remember they wore gloves because I watched that stick machine while they were in the room, and I still wonder how it knew there was nothing in the room they were looking for, end quote. The takeaway, the conclusion, there are countless stories regarding supposed extraterrestrial contact, perhaps even millions. In this case, these entities were human-looking. They're all scattered throughout history, these stories, and many are similar to the ones shared above. To be honest, the consistencies and corroboration that come from examining multiple stories are truly jaw-dropping. There are so many similarities between the stories told by these experiencers and the testimony from actual whistleblowers, making one thing quite clear. Something is and has been visiting us for quite some time. I believe it's nothing to be fearful of, but something to be curious of. Perhaps the more curious we become, the closer we get to finding out on a collective level. The idea that some people are taken goes deep, far beyond the lore of stories such as this, but perhaps that's the topic of another article. It's safe to say, in my opinion, that we know it's happening, and as far as why and for what reasons, that remains a mystery. I personally, for the most part and in most cases, do not believe it's a malevolent type of thing, but I don't know, and there seems to be evidence for both benevolence and malevolence. Now, this was written by Arjun Walia for Collective Evolution, and it's here under Creative Commons on Collective Spark. My comment here is that if anything, from what our Lord Jesus Christ tells us, if anything makes you frightened, it's not good. Okay, so in this case, this man obviously was frightened, he was startled, he was stressed, he was, jittery, terrified, I would say. And this is not good, obviously. If it's from people that are benevolent, they wouldn't frighten you like this. Okay, so you don't give in to things like this, no matter what they ask you, especially when they're invasive towards your privacy or your person. It's not good. So in my case, it is malevolent, because what are they doing in your home, in your property? And let's remember that interdimensional entities can take the form of anything. Let's remember what the Apostle Paul tells us, that the evil one transformed into an angel of light to entice Eve to commit sins. He appeared to her as an angel of light, and he was lying to her to make her fall into sin. Okay? So there are entities that unfortunately can even take human form. We have stories of, I'll try and find some and put them on so you can benefit from that. The monks in Mount Athos, where they have the holy mountain of the 20 monasteries. There are so many saints up there, even living today. They pray all night long. They're awake and they're praying all night long, and every morning they have holy liturgy. But there are times when these entities, these evil entities, come and try and stop them from praying, to interrupt them. And they even come in the form of Zoftic women pleading for help. And we know that there are no women allowed on the holy Mount Athos, none whatsoever. And the evil one takes this form. So whatever frightens us, whatever unsettles us, is not of God. And of course it's malevolent. Anyway, tell me what you think concerning this. These are stories from an Indigenous author sharing the actual experiences of these people. And we know that this is very common in areas where you don't have many people, you know, when it's very rural and lonely, and people are more susceptible that way, I guess. Anyway, this is on Collective Spark, and I'll leave a link below for you. Please comment on this. Thank you. Tell me what you think. Thank you. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.